1964, the evil of Frankenstein made Hammer a profit, but the next year was going to be a roller coaster ride. The studio at this time was backed by Seven Arts and, in 1965, became partners with MGM, which gave Hammer more money and opportunities to develop more movie-making ideas besides Gothic horror. However, the studio had mixed successes in 1965. Several non-horror films flopped, but a remake of the jungle adventure, She, was a major success. In 1966, Hammer released 2 Gothic horror films starring Christopher Lee: Dracula, Prince of Darkness, and Rasputin, the Mad Monk. Both movies were profitable and brought the studio back to producing its trademark Gothic horror. So it decided to produce the next chapter in its Frankenstein franchise. Terence Fisher returned to direct. The original script had been written in 1958 as a sequel to The Revenge of Frankenstein. Anthony Hines, under the pen name John Elder, is credited with the script as used. Peter Cushing also returned. So, in 1966, Hammer Studios started shooting Frankenstein Created Woman.
What is it for? To give life after death, my friend, that's what it's for.
Baron Victor Frankenstein, aided by his young assistant Hans, experiments with the human soul and proves that it lingers briefly after death. The next step, he decides, is to capture a soul and transfer it into another body. Hans is falsely accused by 3 local aristocrats of killing the local innkeeper. He is quickly convicted and sentenced to death. Christina, Hans's disfigured lover and daughter of the murdered man, is devastated when she sees Hans being guillotined and takes her own life. Frankenstein seizes the opportunity to test his theories and restores Christina's body. He transfers Hans's soul into her and removes her deformities. She is now a strikingly beautiful woman who is animated by Hans's spirit. She is, however, driven by vengeance. Frankenstein's experiment quickly spirals beyond his control. Driven by her dead lover's essence, she hunts down the men and exacts bloody revenge to fulfill Hans's desire for justice. Christina's tormented identity fragments between her grief and Hans's rage. Her anguish becomes unbearable and she takes her own life once more.
Much to my surprise, when I was researching Evil of Frankenstein, I was surprised to find one of the search engine results dealt with is Evil of Frankenstein queer coded. Supposedly, because some people have read that the Frankenstein monster in that film represents Dr. Frankenstein's homosexuality, which I think you have to look awfully hard to see that.
To look at it
through
a particular lens.
So then this one, the Frankenstein Created Woman, the main part of the plot is you have a woman who Dr. Frankenstein puts inside her the soul of a man, her lover, but it's still a man. And therefore, I know that there's going to be people out there that's going to look at this as being trans-coded. And I want to go ahead and talk about that a little bit because I think it's obviously dangerous to read modern sensibilities into anything. And honestly, I see this as being more, if anything else, maybe more about trauma bond. But I want to go ahead and ask you guys, what do you see about this issue and whether or not you see any sort of trans coding in all of this?
And here's the thing, I did a little reading on this, and I also want to say that I am not a medical or mental health professional. I don't play one on television. However, this is my understanding of things. There's a term that's fell out of usage now, but it used to be very popular: gender dysphoria. That's my understanding that gender dysphoria, and it's still, by the way, it is in DSM-5. You've got the idea that you're biologically one gender, and then somehow or another, for whatever reason, psychologically, you identify or feel that you're actually the other gender. That's gender dysphoria. Now, in this story, you could argue that that actually happens because she's actually a beautiful woman, and all of a sudden, when she's not under the influence of the head, she's a beautiful woman who doesn't have an identity or is unsure of her identity. But when the guy takes over, she becomes like the nasty little seductress who's ready to freaking pull off all kinds of nasty revenge things. So I think there's some trans ideology in there that you could possibly justify because you've got this female influence and male influence, and they're at odds.
I think, if anything, it's negative because, you do have them trying to force one on the other, and all you get is a raving lunatic.
Well, that's true, but it also would help if we had a clearer idea of the
You know what? You kind of get
time period. Well, no, the time period, because, we're given I guess Peter Cushing is assuming that the soul leaves in an hour, or that's his assumption. We don't.
Based on the first experiment?
Yeah, I mean, based on his experiment, but we don't have that time period. So I guess one thing you have to ask yourself is, where's her soul at the time the body is delivered?
Okay, interesting hair split there.
In other words, her soul's still there, but you got to assume her soul was still there because when she came to, she was acting like a normal woman.
That's problematic, and the reason it's problematic is this. She had no idea who she was. So, and there's so many things that we don't understand why, because nobody's ever really taken a man's brain and put it in a female's body and then had them at odds with each other. So there's so many things that we technically can't actually know the technical part of it, but we can also witness what the hell actually happened in the movie.
That's true, but you kind of get the feeling too they're playing to gender stereotypes. When she's acting the female, she's conniving. When she's acting the man, she's aggressive.
Yeah, but the thing is this though: when she was acting the female, she was actually kind of demure, and the doctors, especially Thorley Walters, was like treating her like a little girl almost.
Right, but then she starts getting conniving when she knows she's got to kill.
Yes, she got under the experience of the guy's brain. Then she turned into a little spot.
I did a dive on this, and apparently the whole Frankenstein, even the novel itself has been appropriated by the LGBTQ community as being an allegory for their existence. Because Frankenstein is considered somebody on the margins.
Even though this person was created and not born.
But in the novel, he was in the captain's bed telling them stories.
But there's also that idea, it's like you're talking about male versus female. The thing is, she acts like that she's being instructed. I wouldn't say controlled, but like the times where she's looking at his head and the times where you hear his voice telling her what to do and she's asking him what she should do.
So the question is how much control.
And that's every scene that she kills anybody, you hear him. And then you don't get a clear picture of it until you actually see his head hanging on the thing. I think there's enough in there to say that there was gender dysphoria going on. I know that that's not a politically correct term these days, even though it's still in DSM-5. But I'm just saying there was enough of that to go around that where you could say the LGBT trans community could probably appropriate this and build some kind of story about it. It is a trans allegory. I think that's a good way to put it.
But if it is, it's a negative one because in the end, by trying to flip it, you get somebody who's not stable.
And like I said, draw your own conclusions.
I mean, that's what I got from it. And when she realized she couldn't be whatever.
She killed herself as a woman, and then she ended up killing herself in her second state, or however you want to look at that as.
But I don't know if she was like horrified by what she had done. Who knows? They didn't actually go into that. I just figured she killed herself because her whole world had been completely and totally messed up. Her dad was dead. Her lover was dead. She was murdered 3 times over.
Yeah, and the thing is, it was almost like after she did after she committed the third murder, he tells her, you can rest now.
Yes.
So it's almost like, okay, I'm done with you. It was a gentle way of saying it.
All right, let me also say something. This was one strange-ass Frankenstein movie. All the conventions, everything, they just threw them out. They just threw them out.
Will you please get me something to drink?